It's the Year of the Garden, and where better to celebrate than Victoria, BC, the City of Gardens.
Recorded on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen and Wasanich nations, this series examines local history, culture, and ecology over a nice cup of tea.
So put the kettle on and join us.
Welcome to Tea and Gardens.
Today we're at the Japanese Gardens in Esquimalt Gorge Park. This particular garden is a new creation, built on the site of the first Japanese garden in North America.
There used to be a very popular tea house here, so we've come to meet Michael Abe to learn more about the history and the future of this garden.
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge with respect the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people and the Saanich and Songhees and Wasanich people whose lands we are on today, and privileged to have this beautiful Esquimalt Gardens in its place. So I was, for the last 8 years, project manager for Landscapes of Injustice. It was a research project at the University of Victoria with Dr. Jordan Stanger-Ross, and we had a research collective of over 50 people. And we researched the dispossession and the forced sale of the property owned by Japanese Canadians during the 1940s. We have a museum exhibit, a traveling museum exhibit called Broken Promises. And we developed elementary and secondary school teacher resources to learn about this dispossession and the internment of Japanese Canadians. And we also developed a research database that has 15,000 case files for those who were dispossessed and uprooted and interned, including my grandparents and my parents, who were both in the internment camps in the interior.
What is your connection to these Japanese gardens here in Gorge Park?
It's a kind of a long story. I don't know where to start. Going back, way back to 1907, there was the first Japanese garden in Canada, probably in Canada, situated here. So this whole park was 20 acres. 10 acres became Tramway Gorge Park. It was like an amusement park. And within that 10 acres was 1 acre that was allocated to these two Japanese entrepreneurs, Japanese Canadian entrepreneurs, Harry Takada and Joe Yoshijiro Kishida. And Joe Kishida sent for his father, Isaburo Kishida, who was a garden designer in Yokohama. And within 3 months, they had transformed that 1 acre into this beautiful Japanese garden that existed until 1942, when that uprooting and the internment of the families closed the gardens. So these gardens here are not the original Japanese gardens, but the municipality of Esquimalt Parks and Rec Department have done a wonderful job putting in place Japanese elements of a Japanese garden in the last 15, 20 years. A few years ago, the municipality of Esquimalt, they were given some funds, and the public were asked to make proposals. So the local Japanese Canadian community, the Victorian Nikkei Cultural Society, which I'm a member of and a former president, we had the idea to build a tea house, or have them build a tea house. So we did a campaign to explain what was here, what used to be here, and why a tea house or something of Japanese structure like that would be of significance to this area. And it got momentum, and that proposal came to fruition. It was changed a little bit. It grew into a much larger project, into a multi-purpose building for the Esquimalt Recreation Center. So it'll be enjoyed by residents of Esquimalt and Victoria alike, and it'll be a real compliment to what's here, the natural beauty of the Esquimalt Gorge Park. But it also has some Japanese design, and you'll see that there's been also some donations of cherry trees. The Takada family, the original family, Dylan Takada and his wife Lisa, great-grandson of the founder, has moved back to Victoria and that our family has donated 25 cherry trees.
We were fortunate to meet Dylan at the gardens at HCP while he and his family were attending the inauguration of a new structure in the Takata Garden.
So we were invited here today here at the Horticultural Center of the Pacific to see this beautiful new structure that the team of volunteers here has created. This garden was built sort of in tribute to the garden that my family used to operate at the Gorge Park. So back in 1907, my great-grandfather's brother Hayato Takata and his business partner Yoshitaru Kishida got an acre of land within the Gorge Park in Esquimalt that they turned into what was actually Canada's first Japanese-style garden and tea house. My great-grandfather eventually took over Mr. Kishida's share in the business, and then from then on, for the next several decades, the Takata brothers ran the garden and tea house, and it existed and was quite an institution in the community, extremely popular as a summertime destination, and it thrived up until World War II, and in 1942, when Japanese Canadians in BC were sent away to internment camps. Unfortunately, the garden and tea house fell into disrepair and suffered extensive looting and vandalism at the hands of the local community, which was the same story that was shared at Japanese Canadian-owned homes and businesses throughout BC. In their absence, these places were unfortunately pillaged. And so at the end of the war, at the end of internment, there was nothing here for the family to return to. So the Takata family relocated to the Toronto area, where most of them remain to this day. And thankfully, more recently, over the past 4 or 5 years now, there's been a wonderful project that's been taking place. The original intent was that it would actually be sort of a recreation of the original World War II era tea house, but for various reasons that was not felt to be an appropriate use of public funds. So it's really turned into more of a multi-purpose building that will offer all sorts of community programming. It'll have a beautiful Japanese aesthetic, and just yesterday actually unveiled this large wall that's covered with historical interpretive information, photos and whatnot that should help share the story with the public. It's incredibly meaningful to see the story of my family, the story of my ancestors honored in this way, and just to know that history will be preserved for many years and generations to come. I think in the current social climate, I think we are becoming more aware of the fact that the histories that we choose to tell are those of colonialism and whatnot, and so far too often it's the histories of minorities and marginalized populations that are just allowed to be forgotten and drift away in the sands of time. So I think this is just another representation of the history of a minority population being preserved, being honored, and I think that's an incredibly important trend that needs to continue. And so the more we can do to create awareness of the experiences of all sorts of cultural groups, in this case the Japanese Canadian population, I think will help us create a better future.
Aside from tea being this huge part of your family's legacy, I wondered to what extent it plays a role in your life today.
I think for all Japanese Canadians, for all those of Asian descent, I think just enjoyment of tea is something that is just a lifelong part of your culture. And I mean, admittedly, I feel quite detached from my Japanese ancestry. I think for a long time that was an issue that I sort of had this inner turmoil with, trying to understand why it was that I felt so separate from that part of my past. And I've come to realize, as I think a lot of people sort of from my generation who share similar feelings do, that was unfortunately as a result of internment and that legacy of these communities, these Japanese Canadian communities being destroyed, being dispersed, and unfortunately through that much of the connection to your culture was lost. And so I certainly can't claim any sort of ownership over Japanese culture. I mean, I wish I did, and it's something that I'm trying to rediscover, and that we're trying to teach to our children and the next generation to have more of an understanding of their roots and where they came from. So from a traditional sense, I guess, it's not like I grew up experiencing, Japanese tea ceremonies or anything like that, but still, I think somewhere in your blood, you still feel this connection to tea, and the way it brings people together, the way it provides, some peace and a chance for introspection. And so I definitely think that it is an important part of our lives. Our toddler loves having tea parties as well, so I know it's going to be a part of her life as well.
If you want to learn more about the gardens at HCP, check out episode 3. But for now, let's return to Michael.
If you imagine back to the early 1900s, and within this Japanese garden were similar to this. There were ponds with ducks and Japanese goldfish, the koi, and there was a bamboo maze that people could go in and find their way out. There was a lot of these pergola and wisteria overhead with canopies, and they had picnic tables all over so people could come and have a picnic. And so they were enjoying this very Japanese style garden within a North American amusement park. And they also ran a tea house just up by that gate that we were at earlier. And the waiters and waitresses and all the workers were all Japanese Canadians, but they didn't serve Japanese tea or Japanese snacks. They were really catering to the local and the tourists. So they served coffee, tea, scones, biscuits, poached eggs on toast, even spaghetti Milanese, and ice cream. The only thing I think that was Japanese was maybe Japanese tea ice cream. But for the most part, they are very much catering to the local community. And they also had different activities. They had a bonsai, which is the miniature trees. They had displays there for people to enjoy. And they had a dance hall or bandstand, and they had musical acts where people could enjoy their tea. And there was also what they call the Japanese ball game, and you could buy for 10 cents. You get 6 wooden balls, and you would bowl them down this wooden floor, and it would make it really rackety rack. So you would accumulate points, and after that, after your turn was finished, you would trade it in for any amounts of prizes, depending on how many tickets you had. And all of these prizes were from Japan, so it added to the mystique or the Japanism of the local community. They all really wanted to either get a Japanese fan, or if they saved all summer, they could work their way up to a nice clay pot with a bonsai, or a glass case with a Japanese doll inside. So all of these prizes were imported from Japan, and they just added to this to the atmosphere of this garden. So this garden existed until long after the amusement park, the tramway Gorge Park. That one started to it went into decline in the 1920s, 1930s, around the Depression, and then because they operated trams, as the cars became more popular, the tram lines became less used. So that was one of the reasons for having this park. It was at the end of a tram line, and people would come ride the tram, come here, and enjoy the day, and then go back. This garden is quite, I guess, peaceful, tranquil. It's really nicely set out because the paths meander, and it gives you that sort of not everything's direct. You wander along a path, and suddenly, I think that's where the word entrance comes from, entrance. You will just come across something that just really takes your breath away, and we really want you to enjoy that beauty, or that moment of discovery as you walk through these gardens. And also the plants are really beautiful. You've got these very soft maples, Japanese maples, the vivid reds. You've got the wisteria, in season, and of course the bamboo, which is always very nice and gives you that sense of strength and yet yielding, yeah, never breaking. So I think you'll just see that the blend of the structure, the layout, the just the ponds and the nature that it attracts is quite soothing and relaxing. And as we saw people, there's benches everywhere. They're just sitting there and sunning in the enjoying taking it in without really having to do anything, just contemplate. I think we have a word in Japanese. It's forest bathing, so it's very similar to this. You just get surrounded by nature and just let everything go.
Could you remind me what that word is?
So that word in Japanese for forest bathing is shinrin yoku, meaning literally forest bathing.
What is the cultural significance of this garden?
Well, if you look at this is the site of the original garden that was designed by Isaburo Kishida. So when he built it, he was using Japanese concepts of Japanese gardening, Japanese garden architecture, and if you see his design at, say, the Butcher Gardens, he takes those principles, but he doesn't just bring in Japanese plants. He did here, but in say in Butcher Gardens, he uses what's native there. So whatever the plants that exist here, he applies those Japanese architectural concepts to. So culturally, it kind of metaphorically blends two cultures. It brings the artistic and the cultural aesthetics of one country, but it blends it to what exists here in this country. We usually hold our cultural fair at the Esquimalt Rec Center every October, except for COVID. But this year, starting from this year, we're going to be holding it here. So it's come full circle. We were hoping to have it in May, but we're going to have it in August, end of August, and we'll have a cultural exhibits and demonstrations. We have taiko drummers, we have Japanese food, and also our heritage committee, myself and my daughter will be giving historical tours of the garden. So some of the stories that we told you, but more in depth, we'll be doing tours here. So that's what this building's about. It's going to be a great addition, not only, as I said, to the community, but also to the greater public here in Esquimalt and Victoria.
Yeah.
The idea was to have a smaller tea house here, and then our tea group would come in once in a while and perform tea ceremonies for the public. During our cultural fall fair, they'll be here and giving demonstrations throughout the day. It's always been a very popular, a big hit whenever we have festivals, and it's a very slow and deliberate, very precise art, which really exemplifies Japanese cultural arts. So when you see how meticulous and how we'll say slow, but for them, how contemplative it is. And I think that's the whole key to it. If you can understand that you're doing this for the sake of contemplation rather than getting something done, then you will really take more out of it. It's much like when I say you're walking through and enjoying the garden, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there. But you're not just not doing anything. You are actually contemplating and refreshing your mind and your spirit.
To experience an authentic Japanese tea ceremony, Michael connected us to the Urasenke Tankokai Victoria Association, and they graciously hosted us in their tea room. After the ceremony, we spoke with Tomoko Carrington and Ayako Ikeda in their garden to learn more about this beautiful tradition.
Chado Urasenke Tankokai Victoria Association was founded about 5 years ago. In Japan, since 16th century, people have been practicing Chado. In Chado, there are 4 key aspects. They are social aspect, ritual aspect, discipline aspect, and artistic aspect. To learn Chado means to learn all of them. That's why I found it very interesting to learn Chado. They say calligraphy in the tea room is the most important thing that we tea students show our respect by bowing first. And then at the end of the ceremony, we also bow to the calligraphy. We have many rules that we have to follow, but calligraphy conveys that day's theme. So today's theme in the tea room was Kojitsu, which means good day. And that's the theme that we share in the tea room. It doesn't matter it rains or shines, your mind state, as long as it's in good day, then it is good day.
Tomoko, she introduced me to the group. That was 10 years ago. So everything I learned from my teacher, Mrs. Mito, she's a really wonderful teacher. I have been studying tea for 10 years in Victoria. I am a student and I'm also teaching as well.
They say there are more than 100 different styles to learn. And there are so many things that we have to learn. We have 4 key elements in Chado. They are in Japanese, wa means harmony, kei means respect, sei means purity, and jaku means tranquility. So what we do is basically we follow wa, kei, sei, jaku. Because processes are very complicated, personally, I put a lot of effort and I try to concentrate so much. That creates me quiet and very peacefulness in my mind.
This handkerchief is called fukusa. Everything I touched each utensil, even though we make sure everything is clean in the kitchen, in front of the guest, we make sure to purify. Along with my mind. Tea is very bitter for some people, and to be able to enjoy a bowl of tea, I think that sweet complement the tea.
We have tea called matcha, which is a little bit bitter than regular green tea. We also have usucha and koicha, 2 different ways of serving. Usucha means a little bit weaker tea. The other one, koicha, is very thick matcha green tea.
During making a tea, I was just thinking about the guest. Before and after, my mind is very complicated. Like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this. my brain is running usually. But during the ceremony, just to think about the guest and appreciate because she's here with me. So I want to make a good bowl of tea. That is usually my mind. Especially we don't talk much, right? Sometimes we have to guess, we have to imply. So therefore, I think about the guest a lot during the ceremony.
Turning the bowl is to respect the guest. We show the front part of the bowl to the guest. When the guest receives the tea, again to respect, the guest turns the tea bowl away so that the front shows to the host. By turning the tea bowl away from me, I show my humbleness and also to respect to the host who made the tea for me.
What I learned from tea is that makes me feel peace and appreciate everything.
失礼いたしました。
Thank you very much to Michael Abe and Dylan Takata for sharing their stories with us.
We also extend our deepest gratitude to the Chado Urasenke Tankokai Victoria Association.
Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.